I wanted to prepare you for something that might feel a little bit discouraging at first, but it's actually a sign that you are making progress. Just as you start feeling better, implementing the tools we've been talking about, and building the confidence in your healing, your pain will probably temporarily get worse. And this isn't a sign that, you're doing something wrong. It's not evidence that this approach doesn't work for you. It's actually a complete normal and expected part of the healing progress. So I want to paint you a picture. I like to give you a lot of examples. And I want to give you a picture that explains what's actually happening. So imagine you have a toddler who runs or who has learned that throwing tantrums gets them what they want. Every time they cry, they scream and stomp their feet. You give them a cookie to calm them down. And then one day you decide that things need to change, that this pattern needs to change. So when your toddler throws their next tantrum, instead of handing over the cookie, you stay calm and don't give in. And then what happens? That tantrum gets worse, much worse. The toddler thinks, this worked before. Maybe I just need to try harder. So they scream louder, they cry harder, and throw themselves on the floor with even more drama. And at this point, you really have two choices. You can either give in, and that will reinforce that, the tantrums work, or you stay strong and you wait for that behavior to naturally fade when it stops working. So your brain has been using pain as a way to get your attention and keep you safe through fear and avoidance. Fear has been reinforcing the pain cycle. Every time you got scared, you avoided the activities or you focus intensely on the pain, your brain has learned this pain strategy is working. She's staying alert to the danger. But now that you are changing the rules, you are not giving the fear the same response it used to getting from you. You're practicing somatic tracking instead of panicking. You're speaking kindly to yourself instead of catastrophizing. And you're staying present with discomfort instead of avoiding it. And your brain, just like that toddler, might think, wait, this fear strategy used to work perfectly. Maybe I just need to turn up the volume. So this is, what I described is called an extinction burst. And this is temporary increase in symptoms. And it can show up in several ways. So I want to give you some examples. The pain, that seems it's more intense than usual, even though you've been making some progress. The pain may show up in completely new location, areas that haven't bothered you before suddenly started hurt. You may be getting multiple symptoms appearing all at once. You could be feeling a pain that feels different. Maybe it's sharper, maybe more burning, or something you haven't experienced before. Symptoms that seem to ignore your tools. Somatic tracking or breathing that usually helped, it doesn't seem to work. Pain that wakes you up at night. When you've been sleeping really well and all of a sudden this pain shows up at night. Flares that, seem to be coming out of nowhere. Old symptoms returning with vengeance. Feeling like you're back to square one despite the recent progress. And pain that seems to mock all your efforts. It's almost like the brain is saying, see, you're really not better. So I want to share with you my client Rachel's story. She's been making, wonderful progress. She's been practicing somatic tracking, challenging her fear thoughts, and even started going for short walks again. Her pain levels decreased significantly. And she was feeling hopeful for, very first time in a very long time. Then one morning, she woke up with the worst pain flare in weeks. It was so intense that, it almost felt like it came from nowhere. She called me in tears. She was thinking she was getting better. She was trying to figure it out. What did she do wrong? If she missed anything. So we spoke about the extinction burst. I've explained what it is. I've explained it's her ways, like almost like a brain last ditched effort to pull you back, to pull her back into the familiar pattern of fear and avoidance. So instead of panicking, we used it as an opportunity to practice all her tools with extra compassion. She stayed present with pain. She spoke gently to herself. She reminded her brain, I know you're trying to protect me, but I'm actually safe. This is just temporary. And by end of the day, her pain had settled back down. And more importantly, she had a proof that she could handle that intense pain without falling back into her old patterns. And this is really like a wonderful logic when it comes to extension burst. So our brain is testing our commitment. Does she really mean it is about not being afraid of this pain? Let me, let me check by turning the level up. Let me check by turning that pain up and see if she's really, if she's really if she's really on that route, if if she's gonna get scared. It's really about our nervous system being used to a certain level of activation. So when things calm down too quickly, it can feel unfamiliar or even unsafe to our system that has been on that high alert for a very long time. So it wants to go back on track, and that back on track to our brain, to our nervous system is what feels familiar. And that's really is pain. And then, another point that I want to make are all neural pathways are, really well established. So our brain has really good at the fear pain cycle, and it takes time to build new pathways that are, that our brain will default to. So I want to talk now about a little bit about how to navigate those extension bursts with grace. So as you heard me explaining Rachel's example, sorry, it is all about expecting and welcoming the extension burst. It really means almost like when it comes in, welcoming, and because it means you're making progress. We don't want to give fear what it wants. So we want to resist the urge to panic, to catastrophize, or to abandon our healing practices. We want to lean in gently into somatic tracking, into soothing or self-compassion. We want to remember that this is temporary. They're very intense, but they're brief when we don't feed them with fear. And we want to remember that we are literally rewiring our brains in real time. So of course it's gonna, there will be some resistance. So I want to, in addition to Rachel's story, I want to talk to you about how that looked like for me, because I still remember those extension bursts, especially because, they come and it feels like they're coming out of nowhere. We are doing so well. The pain, for me at that time, the pain was manageable. I was feeling very empowered, and I was starting to believe like I can do this, I can actually heal. And then all of the sudden, the flare came in. And it was worse than I ever experienced in months. And my first thought was, just like many of my clients, just like Rachel and Grace that I mentioned, see, I knew this was too good for me. No way I'm going to heal. No way I can get better. And then I remember these lessons. I remember learning about extension burst and actually started to not really laugh a little bit, but just taking it with a little bit of lightness. Not because the pain wasn't real or wasn't intense. It was very much real, like I could feel it everywhere. But I recognize what was happening. And it was almost like I said to my brain, nice try. I see what you're doing. You're testing me to see if I'm really committed to this new way of relating to pain. And I am. And I spent that day practicing the tools I've learned, not with a lot of intensity. I've practiced as much as, I felt I needed while really, soothing myself, you know, trying self-compassion, speaking to myself with extra kindness, and treating the pain as an opportunity to prove to my brain that I can handle the discomfort without fear. And that pain, although it felt stronger, um, gave me an opportunity to practice the skills, to do the self-talk, and to, really recognize the extinction burst for what it is. So the practice for this lesson is to prepare yourself for the possibility that extension bursts may happen. And, we're not going to be caught off guard. We know what it is. Remind yourself that intense pain after progress is totally normal and temporary. And then when it happens, respond with this new wisdom. This is an extension burst. It means I'm changing my old patterns. My brain is testing my commitment to healing. I'm going to pass this test. This is very temporary. I don't need to panic or abandon. And I want you to practice all the tools with extra dedication. I don't mean push yourself through it. A lot of these tools, as we talked about it, involve self-soothing, involve self-care. We want to be very gentle for ourselves. We want to really show our brain that we can approach this with a new way of handling the intense sensation. We want to approach it without any fear. We want to speak to ourselves even with more compassion than usual. Um, and if I can encourage you to resist this thinking of nothing's working. And remember, this is part of the process, not evidence of a failure. So, a couple of things I want you to remember is an extension burst doesn't mean that your pain is getting worse forever. It may feel like in the moment, but it's almost like our brain's final exam. It's really asking us, are you really committed to this new way of being? Or you're going to go back to the old pattern if I turn up the volume. And every time you respond to the extinction burst with used tools, instead of the terror, the fear, when you respond with this curiosity, instead of catastrophizing, with self-compassion, instead of self-criticism, you're passing that exam. And your brain learns, she really means it. Fear doesn't control her anymore. I guess I can stop sending these emergency signals. So the storm really is temporary, and your commitment to healing can be permanent. If you experience significant increase in symptoms, it's always okay to check with your healthcare provider to rule out any new issues. Trust your instincts about your body while staying open to the possibility that this could be an extension burst. And it's really a sign then that healing is happening.